The Nasdaq is finishing up its best quarter since 2020, which means markets have been rewarding traders for solid volatility, buying dips, and basically acting like every single shock is going to get absorbed. But that's only going to work for so long. When regimes change, people may get caught flat-footed. Positioning is crowded in a lot of areas right now. Liquidity may be thinning out because of the summer months. That raises a very important set of questions, which is why we bring on Noel Smith here today. He is the managing partner and chief investment officer of Convex Asset Management, and his wheelhouse sits directly at the middle of this conversation here: volatility, options, market structure, and of course, portfolio construction from the hedge fund perspective. So for a trading audience, I mean, this is going to be good stuff here. How do you think about risk when the market looks calm? Is volatility cheap for a reason? When is it dangerously mispriced? We are going to get into that and more. Noel Smith, managing partner and CIO of Convex Asset Management. Welcome to Trading Trends here on tastylive.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You mentioned that you're originally a Chicago guy, but you find yourself now on the West Coast and moving through the Mountain Zone. Before we get in, how do you, as a West Coast person, I'm here in New York, how do you enjoy these trading hours? How does that affect you?
So I have kids, so I love it because I don't do anything at night anyway because I have kids. So the idea of getting up at 4:30 or whatever seems bizarre from a Chicago standpoint, but when you think about, your kids go to bed at 9, so I go to bed at 9, and I'm up early and I go to bed early, but I also get off early. So when I used to live in Lake Tahoe, I'd be off at 1 or 2 in the afternoon. I could go snowboarding for a couple hours, or I could go for a mountain bike ride. So for a geezer dad living West Coast hours or trading West Coast hours, I think it's great.
Yeah, and I have a friend who lives out in Vegas now. I moved out there a few months ago, and he calls me up at like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon his time. I'm going to the Venetian. I'm going to the pool. What are you doing? I'm going to go pick up my kid from tennis because it's still the middle of the day here in New York.
Right.
But all right, let's get into the markets here a little bit. Right now, we're seeing a lot of interesting dispersion, so to speak. The tape looks calm at the index level right now. VIX is falling below 17 again. Credit spreads are staying tight. The S&P 500 seemingly is falling into a summer grind higher here as we get ready for July. Given what you see in markets right now, do you see genuine stability, a calm surface that's hiding something worse, or is fragility about to be revealed as we get ready to make our way through summer?
It's a seemingly general question with a nuanced answer, which is to say stability in what, fragility in what. So something I've done somewhat recently is I shifted some of my hedges from index level hedges or dispersion correlation style hedges at the index to more something specific to what's moving. So what you have is a small cadre of stocks that are moving very wildly, and you have the index writ large, which is not doing all that much relatively speaking. So from a hedging standpoint and from a risk standpoint, I think it's very localized, much like what's going on with just a handful of names at the index level. So I am taking some more risk abatement measurement in just those names that are moving, which is unusual. Usually I try to hedge on an index level overall.
Sure, and to kind of build on that for a second, one of the metrics that's been getting a lot of attention in recent weeks in the options circles here has been Core 1M, the SIBO 1-month implied correlation index. Generally speaking, for the audience, when Core 1M is low, it tells us the market expects stocks to keep moving independently, which can suppress index volatility, even when single name volatility is a little bit active here. So if implied correlation starts to rise, it can be a warning that dispersion is breaking and index vol may finally wake up. All right, so you mentioned here correlation. How are you using correlations in your process? Do you find these low Core 1M readings as an opportunity for dispersion trades, or do you look in the other direction, thinking that it's a rubber band that's stretched too far?
I look in the other direction, that looks like a rubber band that's stretched too far. So when you have anything that's like cyclical, right, it's like kind of like a sine wave. There are boundaries that typically, you can sell VIX when it goes to 10, and it might go to 8, it might go to 6. But man, that's a risky proposition. So, echoing that same sentiment within correlation, if it goes to something like, 8 or whatever, just because there's a handful of names that are moving wildly relative to the index, it's a pretty risky move overall. Traditionally, it's been a very risky move. So yeah, you can sell VIX when it goes to 6 and maybe it goes to 4 and you look like a genius, but it could go to 14 pretty fast. So in that same sentiment, I think it's a risky thing to do. And you have to really disentangle. Now, I trade correlation directly, which is to say I'm looking at the index specifically relative to a basket of names that I pick. And so what I can do within that trade itself is I can pick the names that I want to have included in my synthetic index. So it's not just a matter of looking at the SIBO methodology. I have my own methodology that we've built in-house. And, it's a trade that's been working really well for a long time, sticking with the VIX analogy. If you sold VIX at 16 and now it's at 6, okay, do you really wait for it to grind to 4? That has just got so much asymmetry all over it. So going back to what I was saying before, so when you've got a lot of asymmetry, what does that mean? Do you want to go out and buy S&P puts? Do you want to buy VIX calls? Or do you want to focus on just those names that are really driving this seemingly low correlation that's not really that low?
You're kind of getting into my next point here about when is premium selling attractive. Selling the VIX at 6 to look for it to go to 4. I mean, look at the history of the VIX. Probably unlikely here. Our audience operates in this market from the options perspective of selling premium, and the best premium sellers often know the difference between harvesting that vol and then standing in front of a steamroller. What do you use to make that differentiation when you know it's a good risk to reward? Is it simply the historical returns of the VIX at 16, 10, 5, 30, etc.?
Those numbers to me are kind of arbitrary. What you have to look at is, well, the real answer is you have to come up with some kind of a future projection, right? You have to look at a forward volatility, which is to say you disentangle from, present time from future time, and you extrapolate in the middle. The pricing that matters is what's rich and cheap relative to where it's realizing. So I can just tell you what I did today. I bought some ratio put spreads in VIX, which is to say I bought one put and I sold two further out of the money puts as a way of shorting volatility in a risk-defined manner. Why did I do that? Because I think vol can continue to come in. If you look at the 45, 60-day synthetic hence futures, you've got those futures trading, call it $19. So if you were to buy something near the money and sell something a little bit wingier to offset some of that cost, to me that's a sensible trade. And especially if you've got beta against that, that's fine too. So if the VIX rips up, you lose whatever you paid for that ratio put spread. And if the VIX crashes down, well, if it crashes down, I guess it could lose money, but it'll probably crash down to about where your short strikes are.
So given the shape of the vol curve right now, we're in modest contango, about 5-6 points wide across the front month to the back month here. Do you think volatility in the equity indexes is priced right? Bob Barker, is it cheap? Is it too expensive?
I think it's a
what's
lot.
the volatility surface telling you right now?
Yeah, I think it's a little high. I think that you've got NFPs coming up tomorrow, not Friday. No, Thursday rather.
Thursday.
And thinking Wednesday. And then you've got Warsh talking tomorrow. And I think that there's a recalibration within inflation. And I think with that recalibration, there is some sort of expectation, if you look at the Fed Fund futures, for a rate hike later this year. I personally, I'm almost never a guy with an opinion on Fed Fund futures or go against that opinion because I feel like that's just not something I've ever really worked for me. But I don't think that Warsh is going to raise rates before the midterms if he has any kind of excuse to do so. And with that, I think that nothing's going to happen this year. And I think that vol will come in. If you're looking at those VIX futures priced at roughly 19. Do I think they'll meander down to 18, 17? I do. I think that vol will come in over the next 60 days or so. Hence my ratio 1 by 2 put spread that we just discussed.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned there's a potential shift in inflation. Absolutely worth pointing out. According to the Cleveland Fed right now, their June inflation tracker for headline CPI, negative 0.06%. That's nothing, obviously. It's not going to move the needle materially. But the impulse there is no longer moving to the upside. So I hear you on this. The Fed probably not hiking until after midterms. We got 4 more months here of a market that could potentially get a little bit of room. Do you pay attention to seasonality or any of these stats? One of the stats that's going around right now at the time of this recording is the Christmas in July, final 3 days of June, first 9 days of July, 2.5% average gain for the S&P 500 since 1985 or so. When you think about where we are in the calendar part of the year, does that impact how you view volatility and its evolution?
It's adjacent to voodoo for me. Kind of like technical analysis that, if there was something there, people would arb that out in a half a second, not even a half a second, a nanosecond. So I don't pay attention to it, but I also I'm a person and I do notice trends and I do notice voodoo. If someone sticks a needle in a doll, am I going to get nervous? Maybe, I don't know. But, so I do notice that VIX will tend to do some things at certain times. I do notice some sense of seasonality, but I don't really trade off of it. Which is to say, if the Qs are going down to their 21-day moving average, do I go out there and buy a bunch on the 21-day? I don't. I've never done that. So I notice it.
I would say me neither, but I just recently did that. So,
Jinx, I don't mean to jinx it for you. I do actually look at the 200-day because there's so many people looking at that. But whatever. I don't really.
Well, I think you bring up a good
seasonality.
point there. Like technical analysis, so much of it is just like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Enough people look at the 200, but why is the 200 important? Oh, because people look at it. So,
Yeah, there's that reflexive thing. So, volatility, because there are people that are doing things in it, there's a certain amount of reflexive inputs that go into it. So if everybody thinks vol is going to go down, then nobody wants to buy it, which means people start to sell it, et cetera. So some of that same trade logic goes into technical analysis, also goes into volatility crushing.
Absolutely. Okay, so every trader loves the idea of owning upside if something breaks, but the problem, of course, is going to be cost here. Long premium can be right directionally, and you could still lose money if your timing in the market structure is long. So how do you think about buying convexity efficiently in a market like this? Do you look for specific catalysts, skew dislocations, calendar structures, spreads, tails, or just relative value setups?
All of them. So you could have to look at all of those things. But the market is typically pretty efficient, and you have to figure out what is your budget for burning. The only trade that I do consistently that loses money is hedging trades. Of course, every now and then those things pay off great. But in aggregate, if you just keep an insurance policy on your car, unless you're crashing your car every week, you're just going to spend money, right? They're going to raise your rates to some new level, and you're going to end up, paying money for that policy. And if you want portfolio insurance, unless you get really lucky or you're really, lucky, I guess is the best way to put it, you're going to lose money on those things. When I do hedging trades, I typically do them in VIX. I like to buy VIX call spreads. You can usually get a $5 wide call spread, 60 days hence for 45 to 55 cents. That's not so bad. If you're willing to spend that kind of money, then you multiply that times whatever your hedging budget times divided by 12. But having portfolio insurance is never going to be free. At least I have not devised a way that I can make it free.
Nor have I. And if we can figure out how to crack that together, we're going to be very rich men. And
I love it. I love free insurance, man. Yeah. So walk around blissfully ignorant, just not even worried about the marketplace, and just like, hey, I've got free insurance. I don't care.
Not concerned about a dang thing. Okay, so one of the interesting evolutions in recent years has been obviously zero DTE. I'm curious, do you think that zero DTE has fundamentally changed the volatility landscape? Is it stabilizing? There are a lot of folks who think that this is just more liquidity to help stabilize the market.
I think it stabilizes the market. There was a JP Morgan piece that came out a few years ago that was like very hand wavy that, hey, this is the new instrument of, financial Armageddon. And I was one of the guys that publicly, it's like, no, I don't think that's true at all. I was a market maker. I was a pretty large market maker, and I know a lot of other market makers. And I will tell you for a fact that market making firms really don't go out there and just sell zillions of straddles or sell zillions of little puts intraday and just have those units out there waiting for them to blow up their business. That just is not a thing. They hedge those things off very swiftly, or there's just no ability to blow out. So is there risk? Of course there's risk. Can they lose money? Of course they can lose money. But the idea that Citadel is going to lose $1 trillion in the next nanosecond, it's just not going to happen. So I don't think they are instruments of financial Armageddon. I think that they are a liquidity thing, and I think that in general they stabilize the environment. I also think that they've taken part of the volatility surface and brought it to the fore. In other words, whatever was 30 days or 16 days or 45 days has kind of been brought more closely because people can hedge events. They can look at something like an NFP or CPI or PCE, and they can hedge that in a 1 or 2 date time slice, whereas before they might need a week or whatever. So I think that in general they're a good thing, and I think they're a good opportunity to accumulate premium as well. So on the long vol side, you can take a very specific event, you can disentangle what you think that event volatility is going to be, and then you can hedge it by being long volatility. Or the other way of that, if you want to collect premium, you can go out there and sell 5 of those every week, and you get more than you might if you sold just one 5-day option. So I think it's going to continue.
So let's wrap this up here. A trader's going to wake up tomorrow. They're going to put on their coffee. They're going to listen to this interview. They're going to be filled with great ideas for how to crack this market on the other side of the July 4th weekend. Maybe they don't want to jump in for non-farm payrolls on Thursday. If they're going to look at something first, what is it going to be? Realized vol, correlation, skew, positioning. For a newer trader who's getting into options trading, how do you approach this market?
Oh, that is a very simple question. Man, there's just so much to answer in there. If I was a newer trader trading options, I guess the first thing I would figure out is, what is the vol risk premium? What is the spread between realized vol and implied vol, and how to price an option, and if I identify it as being rich or cheap, and why? Because if you go, the instinct is because of margining or just some sense of hope you want to buy premium, but in reality, you're probably not going to make money all that often by going out there and buying premium. most people I know that have gotten, very rich selling in options have been net options sellers, which is to say you're taking the burden of that capital risk and you're taking it and putting it on your balance sheet, and you're doing it at a price that is advantageous to you. If you look at any one insurance company, these guys are collecting checks from, a zillion people, and they're trying to transmute their risk across their different, zones or their regions. So vol traders do the same thing, right? If you're a market maker, you're not ever going to sell vol at a price that you think is going to carry well for you.
He's been Noel Smith. He is the managing partner and chief investment officer of Convex Asset Management. I've been Chris Vecchio. This has been another episode of Trading Trends. Like and subscribe for more great videos. Thanks for watching Tasty Live.